So this is Dave. Dave, you got an extensive collection. Can you take us through the collection, and can we also start one of these bikes?
Yeah, we're talking about the first Harley right here.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, 11K. Harley produced 18 11Ks in 1914, and this bike was found in pieces. Most of these bikes were parted out and were never found as a complete motorcycle. The frame was found probably about 10 years ago. The engine was found about 5 years ago. Wheels and hubs years after that, and maybe 10 years prior to the front end. So these bikes come together basically from pieces. There's only a handful, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 documented bikes that were actually used and kept all through the years and through the 2 scrap drives of World War I and World War II.
You restored this one?
Yes. I do all the restoration, all the painting.
It's beautiful.
I don't do any of the plating. I have that done, and of course the very fine pinstripe, we have an artist do that. So it's a representation of their 11K. Doesn't have race history, unfortunately, but as I said, he only made 79 bikes, competition bikes, from 1914 to 1921. So if you do public math, I'm not very good. It's about 8 or 9 bikes a year.
And so, just out of curiosity, one of the viewers was asking what the value of a bike like this would be.
If it was original paint with some type of provenance, probably the bidding would start at $150,000. Without any race history and being restored, unfortunately, in a motorcycle world, it really devalues the bike. I just had a similar bike at Vegas yesterday, and the bike sold for $55,000. This would be a bit more because it has more of a factory race engine, and the engines are quite rare. Right now, I think there's maybe 3 other M engines for 1914, so it makes it a pretty rare motor in this bike.
Where'd you find this and put it together?
AMCA, Antique Motorcycle Club of America. They've been around for since the 60s, and they have 8 or 10 swap meets a year. Everything at the swap meet is 35 years or older. So prior to eBay, there would be blankets filled full of parts, and you would trip over them, or bikes, basket cases would be laying against a tree, and you'd buy that. As a matter of fact, the frame is a 1914 basket case frame that I found in Connecticut. It was a collector was just selling it, but it just so happens to fit the 1914 engine I found 4 or 5 years later. So that's how a lot of these race bikes come together.
You won an award yesterday for this. Congratulations.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I think best in class is what it was.
The amazing thing I see here on these early bikes is that they really are motorized bicycles. Yes.
They are.
And they have pedals.
Yes.
Now, what are the pedals for? Can you actually pedal this thing?
It depends on what type of event it is. This particular bike, as most board track bikes, have a rigid pedal where it's actually hooked to the frame with a band of metal, and they act as basically running boards. And the reason they use pedals, you have to remember, is 1914. 10 years earlier, there were really no cars even created, so all these racers morphed over from bicycles, and they were used to pedal. So if you're racing a bicycle in the teens or early 1900s, you'd morph over to these pedals. Some of the pedals will spin, like the Flying Merkle. You can actually start the bike. You go pedal it, the bike starts, and the pedals will stop, and then the engine will be running. Some of them get push-started. It just depends on what venue you're at.
These were death traps, though. I mean, as far as
pretty much.
racing
If you fell, you got killed. They probably lost 40 to 50% of the riders, never lasted more than 5 years, because you're doing 80 miles an hour with a leather helmet. Yeah. And a lot of guys died from infection when they fell on board track. They got a lot of splinters, big splinters the size of your thumb, right through your arm, and that led to septicemia a few days later, blood poisoning, and within 2 or 3 weeks, a lot of these guys just died. So they didn't really die on the track, per se. A lot of them did, but many of them died at home in bed.
And those were the pioneers of modern motorcycle racing, which is still a dangerous sport, but not as dangerous. Somebody wanted to know why the gas tanks or the fuel tanks are square as opposed to today's tanks.
It was just the manufacturing process prior to 1915 was easier to make a square tank, and as metallurgy got more sophisticated and they could bend metal without it cracking, then they started to round the corners. 1915 was the last year of what they call the coffin tank, and then 16, as you can see in the other bike over there, the corners got more rounded and more, I guess, a prettier version of the gas tank.